Saturday Night Podcast. Tonight we're going to be talking about George Washington and somewhere he haunts. Hang tight. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about a place where George Washington haunts. Mount Vernon. Very typical place for him to haunt, right? It's where he passed away, where he lived for a long time. So we're going to talk about that tonight. And there'll be a few more other things involved as well. So let's get into it right now. It says George Washington's ghost haunts Mount Vernon. In the early years of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, when the ladies were at Mount Vernon, they would sleep in the mansion. Of course, the most interesting of all bedrooms is the one belonging to the immortal George, in the room in which he died. In its original four-poster bed, Washington passed away his last moments there. There have been many people who have seen things in this place. All types of situations going on. There's even pictures of people have drawn kind to describe how it looks. And it says many people within recent years have slept in it, and they have declared that they were awake and brought to awareness to see the president standing there. And some people may say it's an imagination, but there's too many accounts and too many situations where people have been describing it in detail of how this is going on. But they will see him standing there in front of his bed or beside his bed, and there's no denying it, right? Obviously, it would be one thing to see a ghost; it's quite another to feel one and to be aware of its nearness of the strange and brooding spectra. They all agree that Washington visits his chambers and still watches of the night. So, in the still of the night, he'll be there watching. Miss William Beale and a friend of hers spent the night at Mount Vernon. At their own request, they were permitted to occupy George Washington's bedroom. In the middle of the night, they were awakened by sputtering of their candles. They had lit one just off to the side, and where the water basin was at, or the basin of water is. They saw this a spook, or that's what they're calling it, a ghost. It went without a noise, and then began to feel alarmed when they were noticing things were going on. You were on the side of the bed where Mr. Washington died, and there was no reply. So I mean, it was just they were trying to figure out, what happened, why they're seeing these things, why they're hearing these things, and one of the ladies were on the side where he died. So these are some of the accounts, a few of the accounts that people have been able to talk about during their place when they would go in there and place of rest at night. Okay, there's more to this as well. It's called an angry gentleman, and it said that this one is back in the 1980s. She says she thought she heard someone in a room behind her, thinking that a visitor had gotten into the area by going under the rope and the barriers. She entered the little parlor to shoo them out, but much to her surprise, she found an older gentleman sporting a large mustache and dressed like the late 19th century, with his sleeves rolled up and secured with his garters. When he saw that he had her attention, he shouted, "What the hell is going on here?" A reference to the noise of the school group and groups that were making. The interpreter told him that she was trying to quiet them down, and then the man disappeared. She saw a portrait later of the gentleman in question, Colonel Harrison Howe Dodge, Mount Vernon's director for over 50 years until his death in 1930. Okay, the next story is putting away his horse. More about George Washington. Quite frequently, the alarm would go off in the stable. Then, about the time that he would take and unsaddled and put up his horse and walk from the stable to the mansion, the alarm would go off in the Washington bedchamber. Guards dispatched to check the situation invariably found nothing out of the ordinary. This man's explanation was that the general was coming home, made his horse comfortable, and then went up to his room. It was just a ghost of George Washington putting his horse up. That's pretty cool. Okay, so the next story is called The Yellow Room. Now, remember, all this is Mount Vernon. Everything has to do with where George Washington lived at once and died. The Yellow Room. A 2006 supervisor from the History of Interpretation Department recalls her first encounter. It goes like this. My first encounter with a ghost occurred in the Yellow Room of the mansion in 2006. I was a supervisor in the History Interpretation Department. Supervisors cleared and locked the mansion after checking and rechecking for assurance that no one was left in the mansion after hours. After letting the last interpreter out the study door, I walked up the steps, past the Washington bedchamber, and into the Yellow Room. I suddenly felt myself being pushed. Feeling the pressure of someone's hand on my back and my shoulders, I turned and looked, and there was no one there. It was obvious I wasn't wanted in that yellow chamber. This happened several more times, and I decided I would not go back upstairs alone. I invited another interpreter to stay with me and travel the back stairs of the Yellow Room. Nothing happened. The next time, when I was alone, I was once again pushed through the room. To keep this room from being disturbed, I felt it was best that I not use the back stairs, but to remove my shoes and cross through the downstairs bedchamber to the central passage and lock the door for the evening that way. Says in 1799, the year of Washington's death, the Yellow Room was the most expensively furnished room bedchamber in the house. So, in other words, nobody wanted her in that room for some reason, and it just got pushed her in the back and like pushed her back out of the room. Wow, what an experience to have! So, there's another quick story. This one's a little shorter. It's called "A Ghost at the Tomb." An interpreter from 2006 explains what happens to her George Washington tomb when she goes there. The first time I experienced the ghost, she puts in quotation, was Easter morning in 2006 when I was scheduled to open Washington's tomb. It was early and very quiet, and there was no one around. The guests had not made their way from the mansion yet. I stood in front of the door, in front to open the door, and I saw an ectoplasm in the far right corner of the tomb. When I moved, the ectoplasm moved. I watched it become a blur in my vision, and I continued to move around. I took a photo and it showed a streak of light through a blur. The second photo showed the same thing. As soon as the voices of the guests came coming down the hill could be heard from distance, the ectoplasm disappeared, and this happened on three separate occasions. The next story is a woman from the Civil War. Now, I don't know what year this was exactly this happened, but it talks about a member of the Mount Vernon's youth program team recounts her experience. Originally, my office was located in the Teachers Resource Center of the Education Center, which is now B. Washington. It was after hours, and the staff had left. I gathered my coat and bag and set them on the table facing my desk. As I turned to put on my coat, I saw a female figure standing in the door of my office. She was dressed in clothing from Civil War period, and she was totally gray. Her complete body, clothing were all gray. She stood in the doorway looking straight ahead without moving. Her stare was very stern. It happened quickly, and then she was gone. There was no doubt in my mind that Anne Pamela Cunningham, founder of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, had been in that room. I stayed for a while, sitting quietly. I listened to the noises of cabinet doors opening and closing and the hands on history. But when I looked to see who was there, the room was empty. Another quick short story. Wandering in the night. One night, around 2010, a couple of security officers were driving around Mount Vernon grounds very late at night. They saw a little girl on the path ahead of them, so they stopped suddenly. Then the girl just appeared right next to them. They quickly spun around and drove as fast as they could. They were trying to get out of there. And that really would have frightened me too. The next story is called A Candle in the Night. And it talks about someone who had worked there and had some experiences and stuff. So this was one of them. I worked for Mount Vernon on and off since 2004. I most recently returned in January 2017. The estate was abuzz with the latest spooky story. On December 15, 2016, some strange sounds were heard coming from the third floor, and there had been reports of temperature dropping by almost 20 degrees. When the tale was shared with me, I was determined to see if it would happen again. On December 14th, the anniversary of the general's death, I was on the third floor waiting for some haunting, but nothing happened. However, when I returned the next night, the vibe in the area had changed. Upon looking into the southwest bedchamber, I noticed an electric candle was on. Thought that's strange. I thought it was dark last night. Had the collections team come and turned it on? Not likely. The third floor isn't open to the public. Then it hit me. George Washington's death, December 14th, 1799. And the next day, Martha Washington shut up the bedroom they shared and moved to the southwest bedchamber. Apparently, she's still marking that sad day. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed these stories of George Washington's haunting at Mount Vernon. There are more, and I will do more soon about that. And until next time, God bless. See you soon.